Bonjour, hello, and welcome to Smudge for Your Thoughts. Today we have Joseph Morsette on the podcast. So, Joseph Henry Morsette is a two-time self-published number one best-selling author in multiple categories and number one new release on Amazon. Original course creator, coach, speaker, consultant, adjunct professor, pancreatitis survivor, tribal enrollee, judge, prosecutor, public defender, federal police officer, enrolled member of the Rocky Boys Band of Anishinaabe, Indigenous Combat II Service, veteran of foreign wars, USA and USAF, husband, father, and grandfather. He is my father, and today we talk about abolition politics, jails, prisons in Indian country. We give a brief history lesson on all of this stuff and have a little conversation on the possibility of it being abolished in Indian country. If you want to learn more, just listen to the podcast. If you would like to read or dive deeper into this information that is presented in this podcast, you could reach out to me at smudgeforyourthoughts.com or contact me at contact@smudgeforyourthoughts.com. And happy listening. All right.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Hello. Welcome to Smudge for Your Thoughts. So today we're going to talk to Joseph Morsette. Could you please introduce yourself? Where are you from? Who you are? How you identify?
Yeah, bonjour. Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Henry Morsette, and as my English name, my spiritual name is Espimit Kiu. It's High Eagle in English, and I'm from Rocky Boy, and it is Rocky Boys band of, and it's Rocky Boy. That's Chief Rocky Boy, so that's Ogima Sneoin. It's Rocky Boys band of homeless Indians in the state of Montana, and we were located pushed from East Michigan all the way to central Montana, and so now we are called Chippewa Cree tribe, after the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. So that's how we are identified now on paper. Chippewa Cree tribe. That's what we are. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. So this is a reoccurring guest. We have had Joseph on our podcast before. He's my father. He was on a previous episode. If you want to learn more about Rocky Boy and him, I believe that's episode 2 of the podcast. So today we're having him on the podcast to talk about Indian country and abolition politics. So to start this off, we're going to start by defining a couple terms. So what is abolition politics? So abolition politics demands a literal end to all punitive systems, including militarism, prisons, policing, and more. The very goal of abolition is to make the practice incomprehensible. So basically, this means that we would make prisons something that you can't even think of. So in the future, if you commit some type of crime or something, or do something, and you are like, oh yeah, they should just be sent to prison. You're like, what is that? The whole thought of actually having a prison makes absolutely no sense to you. You have no idea, no concept for it. So that's the whole concept behind getting rid of prisons, getting rid of these types of jails, anything like that. So we're going to talk about abolition politics here and the possibility of getting rid of jails and prisons in Indian country. So a jail is a building for the confinement of a person held in lawful custody as for minor offenses or future judicial processing. This comes from the Webster definition. And prisons, a building or other place for safe custody or confinement of criminals or others as formally debtors committed by lawful authority, often an institution for the imprisonment of persons convicted of major crimes or felonies. So basically the difference between a jail and a jail is more short-term and a prison is more long-term. I forgot to mention that the definitions that I got for abolition politics were actually taken from Vera et al., Abolition Feminisms, Volume 1. Here's the book right here, if you're looking at the video. It's a really great book. I highly recommend taking a read at it. And so we'll get into this questioning. So first of all, Joe, can you define what Indian country is and give a brief history lesson on prisons and jails in Indian country?
Yeah, so I wrote a book December 12th, 2022, and it's Indian Laws Made Easy, Best Kept Secrets Revealed. So on pages 2 and 3, I go into that the definition, so I'll read that for you. So the Indian country defined is under a federal criminal statute, 18 U.S.C. 1151, A, B, and C. So I'll break it down into each part, A, B, and C. And it's applied in criminal and civil cases. So it goes into criminal, and the civil part is usually like Indian child welfare is where they usually apply that part. So the A part is all land within reservations, all land within the limits of any Indian reservation under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, notwithstanding the issuance of the issuance of any patent and including rights of way running through the reservation. Note, reserved lands, now reservations, were created by treaty, statute, and executive order. So an example would be like the Rocky Boy Reservation. That would be one example of that. B, all dependent Indian communities. All dependent Indian communities within the borders of the U.S., whether within the original or subsequently acquired territory thereof, and whether within or without the limits of a state. And note, see U.S. v. Sandoval, U.S. McGowan, and Alaska Native Village of Venati. And so an example of this one would be there is just west. It's west of northwest North Dakota of Williston. It's north of Williston and it's west of Turtle Mountain Reservation. There's a little Indian community up there. And there's also one that's east of the Navajo Nation, which is in it's outside the boundaries of the reservation boundaries, but it's in New Mexico, and it's on the northwest side of New Mexico, and it's on the northeast side of the boundaries of the Navajo Nation. So that's another example of all dependent Indian communities. Okay, so then we get into C, all Indian allotments. All Indian allotments, the Indian title to which have not been extinguished, including right-of-ways running through the same on and off reservation. And so this one's an example of like the General Allotment Act, where a lot of reservations were opened up to non-Indians. So there's like a lot of reservations in Montana were like that, and you have Blackfeet, Fort Peck, you have the Fort Belknap, you have the Crow Reservation, and they have Louise Cabell. She's a native, she's an Indian, and so you have Indian allottees, and it's restricted lands, and then you also have restricted trust lands, and you have fee lands, which are non-Indian. So you have those as well. All Indian allotments restricted, and then in that way. Primarily from the 1887 up to 1934, the federal government ran programs where some parcels of tribal trust land were allotted or assigned to particular Indian persons or particular Indian families. Many parcels of land are still in restricted or trust status. And that was to say, if you were less native, then you could sell your land. So if you weren't a full blood, you were allowed to sell it sooner. And it was like a 25-year, you were able to. So that was the rule sometimes, but it could be sooner. And then once you sold it off, it was never going to be back in the hands of the tribe. It went to non-Indians. So we get into the second question.
Yeah, so essentially you're saying that the definition of Indian country is kind of there's a few different definitions, and it gets a little bit complicated.
It gets complicated because it's created by a statute, and then it gets expanded upon by Supreme Court case law. See how those cases get embedded in there?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court adds to it. Yeah, so it gets really tricky as they go along. Okay, so now give a brief history lesson on prisons and jails in Indian country. Okay, so we're going back in time. And in my book, I talk about that as well. We go back to page 14 of my book, 1824. On page 14, Congress transferred the Office of Indian Affairs, now the Bureau of Indian Affairs, an instrument of cultural oppression, from the Department of War, then to the Department of Defense, and ultimately to the newly founded Department of Interior. And so this was very strategic as they transferred all this. And so you have the 1824, the Bureau of Indian Affairs originally moved, and then you have the BIA has changed dramatically over the past 185 years, evolving as federal policies swing like a pendulum from an agency of the U.S. designed to subjugate and assimilate American Indian and Alaska Natives to one contributing to shaping policies that promote Indian self-determination. So it's gone back and forth over a 10-year period, over decades like that. So
Yeah,
you
could you
have
just
in
briefly
country corrections. Yeah,
could
go
briefly
ahead.
say what you mentioned the Indian self-determination? Just mention briefly to say what that is.
Indian self-determination. That's what we're supposed to be in. We're supposed to be in the nation to nation building era for the federal government. We're supposed to be in that era right now. Since 1975, we're supposed to be in that nation to nation self-determination era. And that's where the federal government has put money in there to allow tribes to grow their tribal governments on their own. From the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act, where they had to allow them to establish their own tribal constitutions and corporate charters. So we're very young governments. Yeah. So, and then Indian country corrections is one of the key components of tribal justice systems. So the BIA is very instrumental in policing and corrections. They are strong in everything because the 1968 Indian Civil Rights Act is imposed upon the tribal government. It mandates them to adhere to the Indian Civil Rights Act, which has sentencing and jail and everything that comes with it, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and also long-term. You talked about short-term and long-term, so jail and prisons. So the jail for 1 year is the BIA. The long-term prisons is the Bureau of Prisons. So we would send our guys off and they would be indoctrinated with federal people getting indoctrinated with federal prisoners for up to 9 years somewhere. And then ultimately they would come home. And that's not a system that we would ultimately want to have in our tribal communities. Restorative justice is what we're trying to get to, but we're very heavily regulated by the federal government every step of the way, ever since the federal government had been set up. With the case that talks about, I have a case here. It was on page 17 of my book, but that jumps ahead. I don't know if you want to get that far ahead yet.
Yeah, let's I guess let's talk about that.
Go ahead.
I guess we should you mentioned how the little bit about the histories behind Indian country, or jails in Indian country. Can you talk briefly about what was here before the colonizers came over? What was here before any of this was regulated by the federal government, or any of this was regulated by the BIA? Or
There was restorative justice. We had a lot of customary traditions. We had clan systems, the Anishinaabe, and we had 7 clans, and they structure everything around the clans. The mothers, the women, the aunties, the grandmas, they wouldn't let you get away with that stuff. You were subject to that. The aunties and the uncles discipline your the nieces and nephews. You were responsible for many things as the children. You toed the line, and you knew your place in everything that you did. So there was no we didn't have alcohol, so that was introduced by Europeans, and we didn't use tobacco in a disrespectful way, and drugs was never really a disrespectful way like that. We didn't have that problem. Police, we didn't have jails in the sense of the way they have jails here now. So there was never anything like that. We had, yeah, we had our battles, but we did, we would count coups, and we would steal people's, and they would come in, and they would be collected into the community. They'd become part of us. And we also have, one of the earliest cases that we have going into federal court was Ex parte Crow Dog, when he killed Chief Spotted Tail's family, and they did a restorative justice. And that goes on my book, page 17 of the book to page 20. And so that's one example of how the federal government, the BIA, and the federal government didn't like how Indians were doing things already. And so they already had a law on the book, the General Crimes Act. They didn't like that an Indian Crow Dog had killed Chief Spotted Tail in Indian country. They said, no, our laws, the general crimes, has to apply. Why? Because it just has to. Our laws have to apply everywhere in Indian country as well. So we're going to have to apply that. But even though they had already come to an agreement, so the tribe did a restorative justice, meaning they would try to work it out, and they did what was best for the victim and the family. And as a perpetrator, they worked out something that was accepted to both, and had Crow Dog supported Spotted Tail's family and offered provisions such as horses, blankets, and money. And the federal government wasn't happy with the resolution, and there was a lot of pressure to do something about it. And so they didn't like this, and the BIA wanted Crow Dog punished by Western style law. And the U.S. Marshals went in to Rosebud and arrested Crow Dog, and they prosecuted him, and he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. But Crow Dog appealed his conviction on a habeas corpus with the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court held that Congress doesn't have the power to limit what Indian tribes can do. And unless Congress exercises that power, Indian tribes are permitted to govern however they wish. They looked at the General Crimes Act. There was 3 exceptions. 3 exceptions was Indian had already been punished. Yep, he had already been punished by tribal laws. It was an Indian treaty. It was a treaty tribe, already been done. And the third one was, what was the third one here? I had it here a minute. Indian on Indian, Indian already punished, and a treaty tribe. So all 3 exceptions had been met. Well, they didn't like that. So the BIA pushed the federal government to do something about it. The next year, Congress passed a law, and they passed the Major Crimes Act. They said 7 enumerated crimes, 1 is murder. So now they go into Indian country, and the test case is they go find an Indian who killed another Indian in a non-treaty tribe. And now the Indian Major Crimes Act has no exceptions, just the 7 enumerated crimes, and it's exclusive jurisdiction with the federal government. So they come back, and Kagama is the test case with the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, yes, Congress now has a plenary power to pass a law and come into Indian country. General crimes, no good because the exceptions were met. Kagama is good because there's no exceptions and it plenary powers. So they come in and that's what they do. And now they took away federal felonies and now you can't now Indians are sentenced long term for any felonies more than 7. It's a long laundry list, like 30 some crimes, and they're going for life or death penalty. And then now you come along with the Indian Civil Rights Act of 1968, and then you have tribal governments now punishing, sentencing people up to 9 years, tribal members and non-Indians, under the Violence Against Women Act of 2022. You can sentence a non-Indian up to 9 years, and tribal member up to 9 years, and a non-member Indian of another reservation who commits a crime on the reservation. 3 different people: tribal member Indian, non-member Indian, non-Indian, up to 9 years in a federal prison under the Bureau of Prisons program. So that's what's the system we have. Or 1 year in tribal court or jail, or in a county jail with the federal tax dollar paying for it, the BIA paying for it with the contract money, or the tribe is paying for it directly. But it's ultimately the BIA is responsible for the police and the corrections. That's the system that we're surrounded by. It's the number one, BIA. And if the tribe wants to pay for it themselves, they will. But the BIA is responsible. That's the system that every tribe has out there right now. Hopefully that covers what you're talking about as far as the system, but we haven't got to a fix yet.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, you have talked a good deal about the history behind tribes, jail, and prisons in the system in the United States. So I want to briefly talk about, or dive into, abolition in Indian country, abolition of these prisons. In your experience working in the tribal government, working as a BIA police officer, working as a judge, do you think that abolition is possible? Do you think that within Indian country as a whole, or do you think that it has it's possible within individual tribes? What's your take on this?
Yeah, Indian country as a whole, no. The Indian country as a community, individually, yes. The community, there's just so many people, and we're so diverse. We've got a lot of diversity. Native Americans are diverse, just like every other ethnic group out there in the world, and the community is going to want to come together and clean itself up on its own, and regardless of who you are, and if you are born there and you're a tribal member, or you grow up there and you're not a tribal member, or you're a visitor, or whatever the circumstances are, it doesn't work that way. You have to want to do it, right? It's got to be the community wants to. It's like at one time we had no murders, and I was like, and we had one murder in Duck Creek, and I was like, what the heck is going on? That was unheard of. And then we started having people using drugs, and I was like, that was unheard of. And then we started having overdoses and suicides. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then we started having councilmen arrested for being using drugs in there. And then we had then they were charged and convicted. And then we had a 2-time convicted chairman of using being a felon, and so it's like a feather in the cap. It's like it's a disease that it's infested. It's like meth houses that you got to these guys. You burn the house down because it's so bad, and get these guys out of a house, and you turn around and you give them another house, and they're using in a new house. You don't help them get cleaned up. You're not fixing the source. There's no rehabilitation for these users, and you're not getting rid of the drug dealers. The drug dealers may be tribal members, they may be non-tribal members. There needs to be strong laws on that to either remove them or get them treatment. And you got to go in 100% and clean it up. We had a task force one time, and these guys infiltrated the task force, and they sabotaged it. Yeah, I was a judge on there, and we had the councilmen, and we had the police, and we had the city, and we had the FBI, and we had the state attorneys, and we had others. It was and it got sabotaged because people were getting heads up on what's going down, and so it's got to be 100% all in to clean it up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So just to recap what you were saying, that you don't think that it's completely possible right now to get abolition of the prison system in the entire Indian country, but it can happen at a more individual level. It could happen at a specific tribe. And whenever you're mentioning this information, like Duck Creek, you were talking about Rocky Boy.
It's a mindset shift.
Yeah, so it has to happen at the community level. Has to have a complete reshifting of the mind frame of what we're doing. And from your experience there, we didn't really have too much of this crime happening, and it just started creeping in with drugs and alcohol coming into the into this system.
Why is it we're a dry reservation, but we have a lot of people getting arrested for driving around? We have youth. I was a youth judge. We have juveniles all the time driving around, getting arrested for possession of alcohol. And they said, well, I wasn't even drinking. I said, you know what the law reads? It says possession of alcohol. And it says, so you don't have to be drinking it. The law says if you're consumption or possession. And they said, darn it, I should have opened it up and started drinking it. Yeah. They said, next time I'll do that. When I see the police officer, I'll quickly open it up and start drinking it. Because it's all about consumption and possession. That's what the law reads for the juvenile, but it's not written that way for the adult. But that's just one thing. But there's also, if it's a dry reservation, why do you have all these house parties like that? And why are they not, I don't know. It's like they're not being taken serious enough to where the laws, there's laws on the book for really stiff penalties, but once a tribal council son was pled guilty to a violation, which was 6 months minimum mandatory, which I had to sentence him, they repealed that the next day, the 6 month minimum mandatory. Yeah. Politics was at its finest, and they let him out.
Yeah, yeah.
So all the minimum mandatories went out the door.
Well, I mean,
So it
in the end,
was,
that's pretty good then. I mean, they, I guess it just has to happen more to the councilman's family, right?
yeah.
These things for it to get repealed and then for the law to change. I mean, that makes sense. It's a really terrible way to go about it, but if it works, right?
And then if somebody dies, like somebody died one time, then that's when they really jump on, why wasn't there a law in place to have this, to stop from having it take place? If you would have had this in place, it wouldn't have happened. And that's what I'm saying. There's things that you would have had in place, it wouldn't have happened. But we're missing our ways of checks and balances, because you wouldn't have been out doing those crazy things if you would have paid attention to your customs and traditions and your values of your clanship and all that goes along with your traditional way of life. If you're really following your traditions.
Yeah. So you mentioned that earlier, that with that clan system, that those aunties and uncles were watching over people. So you think that community like accountability and engagement would or needs to be put back into place, not as something that completely removes the prison system or the jail system, but coincides
Well,
with
what
it.
happens is we have too much accessibility. Like people can jump in a car and get away from you right away, and we have a phone where you don't know who's doing what on a phone. You get in the car and leave, and so how can someone control you or be able to micromanage you or see what the heck you're doing? It's like, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard nowadays, like that.
Yeah, yeah. Especially with everything so spread out on the reservation, um,
Yeah,
and they're not
or
being,
the world.
yeah, and yeah. So the I know that you had mentioned earlier about parties and drugs and everything, and why are there systems like this? But it's I think it's really because there's nothing really else to do on the reservation. Sometimes there's just, I mean, it's starting to happen now. We're building a new community center in Rocky Boy.
Well,
Um,
that's just a cop out. We had horses that we rode. We went to over the hill. We managed uh, a a youth center. We would go over there. I would run it sometimes, and I used to ride horses all the time. We would play outside, and we would do other activities, and we'd play sports. I'd run. There's all kinds of stuff we'd do that were non-alcohol, non-drugs. We'd go to ceremonies, go to powwows. Those are just cop outs that, you know, oh, just because you're on the res, nothing to do. That it was. I mean,
yeah, definitely. So there's always something to do. You should be able to find something to do, is what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that
now
does.
they're everybody. Now everybody has the internet.
Yeah.
It's Ethernet, and they have the TV now. So
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to have access to everything now. You're wired to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So that does come into a one of the things that I wanted to talk about is uh, essentially the community accountability and engagement. So with the abolition framework, abolition as a praxis, the practice of community accountability and transformative justice emanates from our political frameworks and offers multiple concrete ways for people to become involved. Abolition feminism has always required a practice and engagement. By definition, this requires revisioning, experimentation, and engagement. Abolition praxis thereby encourages people to think of new experimental ways of engaging in community politics. Community engagement may include grassroots organizing, educational initiatives, and diverse array of art forms. That right there, that definition comes from the Abolition Feminism Now book, another great book that I would recommend reading. But that comes into what you're talking about here, that we need to rethink how we go about doing things, going back to our traditional ways of being, of knowing, but also living in a modern world with internet and television and everything, just finding new and exciting ways to be accountable, be engaged in our community, and have that accountability for others. Not just, I guess, aunties and uncles doing it, but every community member engaging in this type of abolition framework, for us to be able to get rid of prisons and any kind of jails in the system. There needs to be some type of accountability. There needs to be some type of community where we all are working together to get this to go away.
Yeah, we stay. I mean, everybody has a cell phone, stay connected that way. I think everyone has Amber Alert and all these other things, emergency alerts and all that. But it seems like we're walking down the road, we're on the phone when we're driving, and then we can't. And then we're on Facebook. It used to be MySpace, and then we see someone that's on our contact list, and we can't even say hi to them in person. It's like we gotta engage with them in real life and just start interacting again. I teach online to several schools, but I love it. I love engaging in person, and it's really great to do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to me today. We covered some great material. Got us thinking about the possibility of abolition of prisons and jails in Indian country. Gave a little bit of a history lesson on all of this.
Yeah, and if you want to find my book that I referenced, you can find it on Amazon. It's really affordable, 99 cents. Yeah, I make everything affordable. I have 2 books out now. I Survived Chronic Pancreatitis. That's for 99 cents. And this one's for 99 cents. I don't try to beat anyone up for any fees there. And Indian laws made easy, best kept secrets revealed. My son asked me, he said, "Where do you cite all your stuff to?" I said, "Son, I cite to myself because it just came really easy. All my my stuff from law and all my notes that I had, I just had them all come out. God said, "You need to write this book, and I'll bring these schools to you." So he did, and it was amazing. It's been not even 1 year. December 12th will be 1 year, and he brought me 5 schools to teach online. Amazing. God is good all the time. And so, yeah, 99 cents. Can't beat that.
Yeah, definitely can't. Great read right there. Learn a bunch of stuff.
I mean, I didn't want to, it's not trying to give you a plug or anything, but we talked about it, and I wanted to just share it. It's 99 cents. Can't beat that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. We will close it up now.
And go Wolverines.
Yeah, go Wolverines.
Yeah, Wolverines. Yeah, go Wolverines. Go Wolverines.